Okay, why did this one work? Square root of 100. Why did that work?
Because 10 can go into 10 times.
Right, because this breaks up into 10 times 10 to give us, to give us 100. So if we took the square root of 100, we would get our 10. Okay, but is there a number times itself to give us 252? No, so how can we simplify this? Let's start with number 4 first because it's smaller. Number 4, we said no. Okay, how can we simplify that still? Think of your list up here. Think of factoring, kind of. Right, we see which one of those can go into 8, and 4 does, so we can break this up into 2 different radicals. I call it the good and the bad. Okay, so we have our good radical here and our bad here. Good means that it's perfect, okay? And you picked 4, right? 4 goes into 8 because that is a perfect square. So that's my good column. I can take the square root of 4. But what do I put in the bad? What's the leftovers of 4? Think multiply. 2. 4 times 2 gives me 8. So I just split it up into good and bad. If I multiplied those together again, would I get back to the square root of 8? Yes, okay. Now the last step is just simplifying that. We got a good radical for the purpose of simplifying. What's the square root of 4? 2. And then you tag on your leftovers. You don't do anything with the leftovers. The bad just stays. So 2 square root of 2 is my final simplification of square root of 8. Kinda, sorta. Okay, let's look at number 3. I know we're going a little backwards, but look at number 3. We already did step 1. Was it perfect? No. So now create your good and your bad. Good, bad. So now look at your list of perfect squares. Which one goes into 32? 16. So 16 goes in the good. What is the leftover that goes in the bad? Remember, we're multiplying. So you want to do 32 divided by 16. So 2. Okay, and then what's the last step? Simplify, right? You broke it up into good and the bad, so simplify the good. What's the square root of 16? 4. What do I do with the leftovers? Keep them. And you know you're done when your square root or your radical is in simplest form. You can't go any farther. Bigger number, but we go through those same steps. Was it perfect? No. So now we want to simplify into good and bad. So it's a little bit of a bigger number, so you may need your calculator to figure out which one of these goes into it. I'm glad you did that. Okay, so the good is what? What's the perfect square that went into that? 9. What's the leftovers? 28. Okay, last step is what? Yep, simplify. Square root of 9 is 3, and then tag on the leftovers. Is that my final answer? Why do you say no? Right, 28 can keep going. Okay, so let's keep going. So we're going to keep our 3 and then create a new good and bad. So what's a perfect square that goes into 28? What? Did you say 4? 4. And then what's the rest? 7. So now simplify. I still have that 3. What's the square root of 4? 2. What do I do with the square root of 7? Keep it. Okay, and then the last thing I can do is what? Multiply 3 and 2. Yep, 3 times 2 is 6, square root of 7. Okay, so sometimes you might have to do multiple steps. Here's a hint. Take 252. You want to find, so 225 is not yet 252, right? Start there. Okay, because you want to try and get the biggest factor that goes into it. So then you don't have to do multiple steps. So go. So if I broke it up with 36, square root of 36, what's the leftovers? 7. So now simplify. What's the square root of 36? 6. Tag on the leftovers. So instead of doing it in 2 steps, we just did it in 1. but you still get to the same answer. Try the square root of 12. I'm going to give you 2. Try the square root of 12. I just wrote it off to the side. Try the square root of 12, and then try the square root of 54. What'd you come up with 12? Let's walk through the steps. What's the first thing you ask yourself? What's the first thing you want to know? Is it perfect? You ask yourself, is it in our list? Is it perfect square? Is 12 a perfect square? No. So what do we ask ourselves next? What goes into it from our list? What'd you guys come up with? 4, and then its leftovers are 3. Okay. Last step, simplify. What's the square root of 4? 2. What do I do with the leftovers? Keep them. Good? Okay, what about square root of 54? First step is what? Is it perfect? Yes or no? No. What do I do next? What goes into it? What'd you guys come up with? 9, and that's left over is 6. So last step, simplify. What's the square root of 9? 3. What do I do with the leftovers? Keep them. Good. Okay.
If you divide by 9, say, can you switch the number? Or you divide by 6, can you keep it 6 and then 9?
Yeah, and then yeah, that's fine. Yep, because you'll still get the same answer.
Okay, yeah.
That makes sense? Okay. All right, before I get into algebra ones, I want to look at 9 and 10. What do you notice is different about 9 and 10? We have 2 different radicals multiplied together. First thing I want to do is create 1 radical. So all I do is just multiply them together. 2 radicals create 1 big radical. So what's 8 times 8? 64. Now go through those 3 steps. Step 1. Is it perfect? Is it? Yes. What's the square root of 64? 8. What do you notice from what we started with to what we ended with? It's the same number. So when you multiply a square root times itself, you're going to be left with the number on the inside. Okay, when you multiply a square root times itself, you're going to be left with what's on the inside. Okay. Number 10, what do we need to do first? Multiply them together. What do we get when we make a big radical? 150. Now go through those 3 steps. What goes into 150? It is 25. 25 is the good. What's the bad? 6. Last step, simplify square root of 25. 5. Leftovers. Keep them. Okay, obviously the difference is we have algebra in it now. Okay, we're still going to do the same process. We're going to have a good and we're going to have a bad. Okay, let's do the number first. Is 28 perfect? No. What goes into 28? What perfect square goes into 28? It is 4. 4, what are the leftovers? 7. Now, what do you think we do with the b to the 3rd power? What did you say? What do you mean by that? We are going to square root it, but is there a good part of it and a bad part of it?
Probably.
Like, we found a good and a bad of 28. We need to find a good and a bad of b to the 3rd. Say that one more time. We can make it good. What number is technically right here? A 2. What exponent does b have to have in order to cancel it out? A squared, right? Because if I took the square root of this, b is left. So how many b's are good?
One of them. 2 of them.
2 of them, right? B to the 2nd power, and then how many are left?
1.
1 of them. So I put the 1 in the bad. Watch. So now if I take the square root of my good, what's the square root of 4? 2, what's the square root of b squared? B, right? Because look over here. Remember when you take the square root of a square? Those cancel each other out. And then the bad, what do we do with the bad? Keep it. And then you're done. Because we can't simplify 7b, the square root of 7b anymore. So you're still thinking in terms of good and bad. It's just dealing with exponents instead.
Wait, so is the first one, like, in the first one, is it always going to be B2?
Not always. Can we look at number 6?
Yes.
Let's look at number 6. Okay, let's deal with the 321st. Is the square root of 320 perfect? It is not, so find something that goes into it. The good is 64, the bad is 5. Now remember, with square roots, that number right here is technically 2, yes? Okay. So how many are good? Okay.
2. Oh, no.
That's okay. How many are bad?
Oh, no. That's probably not good.
Aren't these the same thing? So shouldn't they both be good?
Oh, yeah, because they equal each other, so.
So they should both be good. So are all of our A's good?
No. They're not. They're not. Oh.
Right?
They're not supposed to be.
If you said I had 2 that are good, how many are left? 2. But aren't 2 good? Like these are the same thing, yes? So they should both be in the good. So how many are good? 4. Okay. Now let's take the square root of both of those. What's the square root of 64? 8. What's the square root of 8 to the 4th? What times what gives me 8 to the 4th? 8 to the 2nd. Yep. And then tag on your leftovers. Explain. What number is technically in front of here again?
2.
A 2. So think back to this one. I took 2 divided by 2 to get my 1. On this one, I took 4 divided by 2 to get my 2. Yes? Okay, what do I do? How do I split it up? How many different radicals am I going to have? I have a good and a bad. So make your good, make your bad. Split up the number first. Is 108 perfect? No, find something that goes into it. What is it? 36 and 3. So 36 is good. 3 is bad. Okay, how many different variables do we have? We have 2. We have m and an n. Let's work with m first. Is m perfect? How many do I have? I have 1. Can I break that up at all? No. So is it good or bad? It's bad because I can't take the square root of m. So m goes in the bad. Well, what about n? Same thing. N also goes in the bad. So now simplify. What's the square root of 36? 6. What do I do with the leftovers? Keep them. 3mn. Because I did that because I can't take 1 divided by 2 to give me a whole number. That's why they were both bad. Look at 8. How many radicals do I split them up into? 2. Good. And a bad. 108. Same thing, right? 36 and 3. Now let's focus on the variables. How many do I have? I have 2 variables, right? But let's work with m first. I have 3. How many of those can go into 2? Right, 2 of them are good. So I'm going to have m squared here. How many are left? 1. So 1 goes in the bad. Now let's work on the n to the 4th. Can 2 go into 4? They all would, right? All of them are good. So n to the 4th. Do I have any that go in the bad? No. So now what's the last step? I broke them up. What's the last step? I'm going to simplify the good. Okay, we put it in the good because it can be simplified. What's the square root of 36? 6. What's the square root of m squared? M. What's the square root of n to the 4th? N to the 2nd. What do I do with the leftovers? Keep them. Okay, what do you notice is different about 11 compared to 9 and 10? There's a number in front, okay? What you need to understand is we cannot combine whole numbers with radicals. Okay, you can't multiply a whole number with a radical because they're not the same thing. So here, what's technically in front of that square root of 5? What whole number? 1. So we're going to multiply our whole numbers together. 4 times 1? 4. And then we're going to multiply our radicals together, which is square root of 15. Now go through this 3 steps if we can simplify square root of 15. Is square root of 15 perfect? No. Does anything go into it? No. So can I do anything? Nope, so I'm done. Number 12. What do I need to do? Yep, 1's technically in front, so multiply your whole numbers. And then multiply your radicals. See if you can simplify 200. You could have done 25 and 8, but you could go farther. What's a perfect square that goes into 200? 100. And then the leftovers are 2. So now simplify. We keep the 4. Don't lose your whole numbers out in front. What's the square root of 100? 10. And then we tag on the leftovers. Last step I need to do. Multiply them together. 40 square root of